I mentioned that modules are merged into your main store on the same level as all the other things in the store. You can change this behavior, and there is one place where it actually already did change. Let's say inside of a mutation, inside of the increase mutation, let's say, we console log our state. So that's inside of the counter module now, inside of the increase mutation. Well, let's have a look what happens if we click add 10. This is the log here for our state. And if we have a look at this, we see something interesting. Do you notice it? We see the counter in there, but there's one thing we don't see in here. Our authentication state. We don't see is logged in there, this state. Now I just said it would all be merged into one store. So why don't we see is logged in here in the state of our counter module then? Because the state inside of a module is actually treated as a local state inside of the module. Mutations, actions, and getters are global. You can access them as before on the main store. But the state is local to this module. So anything you do on this state inside of this module refers just to this state module. So for example, in a getter, I would not be able to get the auth status. If I add a new getter in the counter module getters object, test auth, and I try to return state is logged in, this will not work. If I now try to access test auth, let's say in the user auth component, we had another computed property is test auth, where I return this newly added getter test auth, which I just added to the counter module. If I access this here, and I then simply output the value, let's say in a paragraph, like this. So if I output this newly added computed property, which uses the new getter here, this will not work. First of all, though, I have to fix an error. In main.js, in the new test auth getter, of course, I should accept state as an argument in order to use it. But even with that, you notice there's nothing below the button. And if we change it, there's still nothing, because it doesn't find is logged in the getter here, in the state of this getter, because this getter is in the counter module, and as I mentioned, the state is local. So here we only have access to the state that belongs to this module. So that's important to keep in mind. And it's similar for actions and mutations. There, in context, for example, where you learned earlier that you also have access to the state, in case you needed it, you also only have access to the state of this module. Now, in case you need to work around that, there are ways though. For example, in getters, inside of a module, you now don't just get state and getters as before, but you can now also get access to a root state and root getters. And you might remember that we saw similar properties on this context object earlier in the module. This is your way of getting access to the main state, the main getters of the entire store, instead of just the state of this specific module. So this is your fallback way of getting access to state that's not part of this module, in case you need it. Typically though, of course, inside of a module, you tend to just work with the state that belongs to the module. So you probably don't need this too often, but there can definitely be situations where you do need it.